days before Sean "Diddy" Combs was arrested, the world saw a side of the mogul few could imagine. A man meticulously planning a full-scale media blitz to control the narrative about himself. The Netflix docuseries Sean Combs. The Reckoning reveals this tense, calculated period of his life in shocking detail. Diddy, known for his larger-than-life persona, was suddenly hyper-focused on perception, obsessing over how the public would view him if allegations and scandals hit too close to home. In a private phone call captured in the documentary, he discusses hiring a strategist, someone from this country or another country, someone who had dealt with the dirtiest of the dirtiest, dirty business of media and propaganda. Even at the peak of his fame, he was orchestrating a calculated approach, almost like a general mapping out a battlefield. It wasn't just about spin. It was about survival, control, and preserving a reputation built over decades in an industry that devours the unprepared. The footage shows him pacing, speaking in a mixture of intensity and frustration. Diddy's concern wasn't only about headlines. It was about narrative ownership. He wanted someone who could not only respond to critics, but proactively shape the story before it spun out of control. Every word, every strategy, every move in that conversation was a window into how someone at the top of the entertainment world thinks when under extreme pressure. The mogul's world is one where perception is as valuable as currency, and missteps can cascade into irreversible consequences. For a man who built an empire from the ground up, controlling what people see and believe is second nature. But here, the stakes were higher than ever. Interestingly, the doc also captures the tension between public image and private turmoil. Behind the scenes, there's a man who is tense, perhaps scared, and hyper-aware of the scrutiny that comes with fame. Even someone like Diddy, who has survived decades of public attention and scandal, was clearly shaken. There's a strange mix of vulnerability and bravado. He knows the world expects a confident mogul, but he also knows how quickly things can spiral when allegations touch the wrong nerves. His words to his lawyer reveal not just a concern for how events would appear, but a detailed understanding of the power of social media, bloggers, and new media influencers, a network he's trying to manage before it manages him. This segment of the documentary doesn't just show us Diddy planning a media campaign. It gives insight into the psychology of a man who has always been obsessed with image. Every call, every strategy session, every interaction hints at a larger pattern, a relentless drive to control how the world sees him, even as chaos surrounds him. And yet the tension builds because the audience knows the outcome. 6 days later, he would be arrested, and all the careful planning, all the strategic thinking would meet the harsh reality of law and media scrutiny. The irony is palpable, and the doc captures it with chilling clarity. By the time viewers watch this, it's impossible not to feel the tightrope he's walking, a high-stakes game where one misstep could unravel an entire empire. And just when you think you've grasped the intensity of this pre-arrest strategy, the documentary hints at something even darker, something that goes beyond media and messaging. But that's not revealed yet, and that's what keeps viewers on the edge of their seats, wondering what comes next. To understand Sean "Diddy" Combs, you have to go back to the very beginning, a childhood filled with extremes, where glamour and chaos coexisted in ways that would shape the man he became. Losing his father at just 3 years old was a defining moment. His father, involved in New York's notorious drug scene, was murdered, leaving a void in young Sean's life. But while tragedy marked the start of his life, his mother, Janice, introduced him to a world that was just as intense, if not more unpredictable. According to childhood friend Tim Patterson, Janice threw some of the wildest parties imaginable. These weren't casual gatherings. They were events straight out of a magazine, filled with glamorous women, influential men, hustlers, and even NBA players. You got the ladies who looked like they were straight out of a Jet magazine. Some brothers up there, if you want to call them pimps, you can. If you want to call them hustlers, you can. You got a member of the New York Knicks, or two, Patterson recalls. A literal stage in the living room became a performance space where young Sean learned to dance, entertain, and absorb attention from a very early age. The intensity of these parties had a dual impact. On one hand, they exposed Sean to the highs of social admiration and influence. On the other, they masked a darker undercurrent. Patterson also recalled that the environment at home wasn't just extravagant, it could be violent. Janice was a disciplinarian, allegedly strict to the point of fear, and Sean witnessed and later experienced beatings that left lasting impressions. In a clip from inside the actor's studio, Janice herself acknowledges that Sean received a lot of beatings, hinting at the harsh discipline behind the glamour. For a boy, living amid both luxury and violence created a complex psychological landscape. Sean absorbed lessons about power, control, and attention that would later influence not only his career, but his personal relationships. Even the dynamic between mother and son could be volatile. The documentary suggests that the aggression ran both ways, early tensions foreshadowing future conflicts. These experiences left a mark on Sean, teaching him how to command attention, assert dominance, and navigate social hierarchies from a young age. It's easy to see how the mix of charisma, bravado, and a taste for control that would define Diddy's adult life was seeded in these formative years. And yet, the parties weren't just an introduction to fame or social maneuvering. They were a double-edged sword. While they offered a glimpse of glamour and connection, they also normalized extremes, excess, manipulation, and the idea that social power could be wielded as easily as a a toy. It's no surprise, then, that the documentary later links these early experiences to some of the darker behaviors Diddy exhibits in adulthood: obsession with control, media manipulation, and at times aggression. By showing us the wild parties, the household tension, and the early exposure to both charm and chaos, The Reckoning paints a vivid portrait of a young Sean Combs navigating a world that was thrilling, dangerous, and deeply influential. These childhood experiences weren't just background color. They were the blueprint for the ambition, risk-taking, and controversy that would define his career. And as the audience absorbs this complex tapestry of loss, glamour, and fear, the question lingers: how much of Diddy's later life can be traced back to these early lessons? And just when you think you understand the roots of his personality, the documentary dives into even darker territory: the first flashes of aggression and control that would ripple through his relationships and career. As Sean Diddy Combs grew into adulthood, the charisma and confidence that had served him well in childhood began to show darker edges. The Reckoning doesn't shy away from exposing these early flashes of aggression, painting a picture of a man whose drive for control sometimes spilled over into violence. One of the earliest incidents documented occurred during his relationship with stylist Missy Hilton. According to longtime friend and co-founder of Bad Boy Entertainment, Kirk Burroughs, jealousy and suspicion drove Diddy to physical confrontation. Outside Uptown Records, an altercation reportedly erupted where Sean allegedly struck Hilton, with bystanders intervening to separate them. While the incident may seem shocking, the doc frames it as part of a broader pattern, one in which Diddy learned to assert dominance, even in intimate settings, as a reflection of his desire to control the world around him. The documentary also revisits a particularly volatile moment with his mother, Janice, following the December 1991 celebrity basketball game tragedy in Harlem, which resulted in a stampede and the deaths of 9 people. Janice reportedly questioned her son's choices, expressing concern about his young career path and the decisions he had made leading up to the tragedy. Burroughs recalls seeing Sean physically lash out, calling his mother a derogatory term and slapping her. This shocking incident underscores a recurring theme in the doc: that aggression, whether inherited from childhood experiences or developed in response to stress, became an outlet for Diddy's intense emotions. The lines between personal frustration, public image pressure, and private rage were blurred, setting a stage for patterns that would surface repeatedly in his life. The Reckoning also sheds light on Diddy's early professional environment, illustrating how his need for control extended into his workplaces. Burroughs recounts an incident in which Diddy used sexual acts as a power play, deliberately orchestrating a situation in his office to display dominance and unsettle others. A woman reportedly performed a sexual act at his desk, while Burroughs observed from a nearby cubicle. When confronted afterward, Diddy's response was calm, almost dismissive. He wanted Burroughs to witness the scene, not participate. It was an unsettling early lesson in Diddy's approach to influence, blurring professional boundaries to maintain control and test loyalty. What makes these stories so compelling in the doc is the context in which they unfold. Each incident is not presented as isolated, but as part of a cumulative picture of a man whose childhood trauma, exposure to extremes, and ambition combined to create both extraordinary talent and troubling behavior. These early outbursts were formative, revealing tendencies that would echo throughout his relationships, business dealings, and public life. But the narrative doesn't stop with intimate or professional aggression. The Reckoning begins to hint at how these early behaviors foreshadowed Diddy's involvement in more complex, high-stakes controversies, from the deaths of friends and associates to allegations that would shake the foundations of his empire. The doc positions these incidents as a prelude, asking viewers to consider how a combination of upbringing, trauma, and personality can escalate into patterns with far-reaching consequences. And just when you start thinking you've seen the full extent of Diddy's early aggression, the documentary moves into one of the most scrutinized and emotionally charged chapters of his life: the death of Biggie Smalls and the shadow it cast over everything Diddy would do next. No story about Sean Diddy Combs is complete without confronting one of the darkest, most scrutinized chapters in his life: the murder of Christopher Wallace, better known as Biggie Smalls. The Reckoning provides never-before-seen glimpses of the moments leading up to the East Coast rapper's death, including grainy footage and audio from the fateful night of March 9, 1997. Viewers hear the chilling gunshots and panic 911 calls, and the documentary immediately sets the stage for one of hip-hop's most infamous tragedies. But the doc doesn't stop at the event itself. It digs into the web of decisions, rivalries, and alleged miscalculations that some claim led to Biggie's death. One of the most explosive claims comes from Kirk Burroughs, who suggests that Diddy may have played a role in placing Biggie in harm's way. According to Burroughs, Wallace had wanted to leave for a European press tour, an opportunity that would have taken him out of Los Angeles, away from the volatile West Coast-East Coast tensions that were escalating after Tupac Shakur's death in September 1996. Diddy, however, allegedly canceled these plans to host a party on enemy turf, keeping Wallace in Los Angeles despite the risks. Burroughs doesn't mince words. He lied about it. He ushered Biggie to his death. While the doc frames these statements carefully, emphasizing that they are allegations and recollections, the audience is left grappling with the the implications of power, ambition, and loyalty in Diddy's world. The documentary also explores the lavish funeral arrangements that followed. Biggie's passing was a tragedy for the music world, yet Diddy's approach to the funeral sparked controversy. Burroughs claims that while Diddy wanted the biggest funeral New York has ever seen, he allegedly planned to have Biggie pay for it, in a sense, framing the event as a spectacle that enhanced Diddy's own image. The irony is stark, a monumental celebration of a life lost, intertwined with business-minded calculations. This juxtaposition highlights a recurring theme in Diddy's story: the tension between public perception and private ambition, between personal grief and strategic image management. Beyond the funeral, The Reckoning revisits Diddy's public statements over the years, including his 2017 documentary Can't Stop, Won't Stop, a bad boy story, where he claims Wallace wanted to stay in Lowe's Angels. Burroughs directly contradicts this, suggesting that Diddy's version of events strategically frames his own narrative and deflects responsibility. The doc uses these conflicting accounts to explore not just the event itself, but the ways memory, media, and legacy collide, leaving fans and historians questioning how much of the story is truth and how much is carefully curated storytelling. By weaving together archival footage, interviews, and first-hand accounts, the documentary frames Biggie's death as both a personal tragedy and a turning point in Diddy's life. The stakes were more than emotional. They were professional, social, and cultural, marking a moment that would forever shadow Diddy's empire-building ambitions. The audience begins to see the complexity of influence, power, and consequence, a world where decisions carry immense weight and mistakes can be fatal. And just when it feels like viewers have absorbed the full scope of this tragedy, The Reckoning takes them further into Diddy's life, exploring the bizarre, controversial rituals and personal excesses that would later define his trial and public image, including the sex scandals and freak-offs that shocked the world. As The Reckoning delves deeper into Sean Diddy Combs' life, it exposes a world that is as shocking as it is surreal. A world of sex scandals, extreme parties, and controversial behavior that pushed boundaries in ways most fans could never have imagined. One of the most riveting parts of the doc is the interview with Clayton Howard, a former sex worker who claims to have worked closely with Diddy and his then-girlfriend, singer Cassie Ventura, for 8 years. Howard recounts in vivid detail the infamous freak-offs and drug-fueled, multi-day sex parties that became central to Diddy's trial. These events weren't casual indulgences. They were carefully orchestrated spectacles in which control, power, and exhibitionism were tightly interwoven. Howard describes scenarios involving Cassie and himself, sometimes spanning days, with unusual rituals and practices that became a recurring theme in Diddy's life. Baby oil, marathon sessions, and videotaping were all part of the elaborate arrangements, creating an environment that was both intoxicating and manipulative. For viewers, the first-hand account adds an extra dimension to the already sensationalized media coverage. It's one thing to hear about these activities in court reports. It's another to hear the story directly from someone who participated, offering raw insight into the psychology behind the scenes. Perhaps most disturbing and bizarre were the annual tributes tied to Biggie Smalls' death. Every March 9, the day Biggie was murdered, Howard recalls being flown to Diddy and Cassie's location to participate in multi-day gatherings, where partying and sex were intertwined with ritualistic homage. The doc presents this as both shocking and surreal, a strange, almost tone-deaf attempt to memorialize a tragic loss. It underscores a pattern in Diddy's behavior, the merging of personal gratification with symbolic gestures, creating a world where boundaries between grief, celebration, and indulgence became dangerously blurred. But the documentary doesn't just focus on the shock value. It also frames these events in the larger context of Diddy's personality and career. Control is a recurring theme. Howard's accounts demonstrate how Diddy exerted influence over partners, orchestrating scenarios that highlighted his dominance and authority. Cassie, a celebrity herself, was portrayed as both a participant and an instrument in these events, with Diddy's meticulous planning ensuring that he remained at the center of every narrative. Every party, every ritual, every orchestrated moment served to reinforce his power and influence, both privately and publicly. The doc also highlights the blurred lines between fame, desire, and legality. While some events were indulgences in excess, others became central to the legal scrutiny that would later define his trial. By combining first-hand testimony, archival footage, and context from friends and collaborators, The Reckoning crafts a narrative that is as gripping as it is unnerving. It forces viewers to confront the contradictions in Diddy's life, a man celebrated for his influence and music, yet deeply embroiled in morally complex, controversial behavior. And just when the audience thinks they have grasped the limits of his audacity, the documentary transitions seamlessly into moments of public display and personal obsession, showing how Diddy's quest for control extends far beyond private scandals, reaching into reputation management, PR tactics, and the way he navigates public perception. While Sean Diddy Combs' private life was rife with controversy, The Reckoning also exposes his meticulous, sometimes bizarre efforts to manage how the public perceived him, even when those efforts came across as tone-deaf or out of touch. In footage shot the week before his 2024 arrest, Diddy is seen walking through the streets of Harlem, interacting with with fans in an attempt to appear approachable and community-minded. At first glance, these gestures seem heartfelt, a man reconnecting with his roots. But the doc quickly reveals a darker undertone. Diddy's obsession with perception extends beyond the typical PR strategy into almost compulsive territory. He complains aloud about needing hand sanitizer, about the sheer number of people he has hugged, and insists on taking an extreme cleansing ritual afterward, boiling water, peroxide, as though contact with everyday people could somehow tarnish his carefully constructed image. This hyper-awareness, bordering on absurdity, paints a stark contrast between his life behind closed doors and the world outside. The documentary also highlights how Diddy's PR machine operated during his trial, illustrating the extraordinary lengths taken to shape narrative in real time. According to blogger Tisa Tells, Diddy's team actively engaged with YouTubers, Instagram influencers, and TikTok personalities, supplying them with transcripts, highlights, and suggested talking points. These tactics allowed his team to influence how events were reported and perceived, ensuring that Diddy's perspective, or at least a version of it, was amplified across social media. In the lunchroom of the courtroom, Diddy's PR team reportedly held court with these media figures, whispering strategies and guiding narratives, demonstrating a level of influence rarely seen outside major political campaigns. For viewers, this serves as a window into the power dynamics at play. It's not just what happens in court, but how the story is told that shapes public perception. What makes this section particularly striking is the juxtaposition between Diddy's meticulous planning and the reality he faces. While he is orchestrating these campaigns, he is simultaneously under the scrutiny of the media, fans, and the legal system. The doc emphasizes that the audience witnesses both the genius and the vulnerability, a man who understands that image is everything, yet is increasingly disconnected from how those images are received. His approach is simultaneously calculated and tone-deaf. He wants to appear relatable, humble, and community-focused, but the over-the-top rituals and obsessive cleanliness undercut those intentions, leaving a sense of unease. Beyond the spectacle, the documentary frames these actions as part of a broader narrative about control. Every handshake, every staged interaction, every media whisper is a strategy designed to maintain dominance in a world that constantly challenges his authority. The audience begins to see that for Diddy, image isn't just a byproduct of fame. It's a weapon, a shield, and sometimes a trap. And just as viewers start to process this extreme blend of public persona and private obsession, the doc transitions into another layer of Diddy's life, the abuse and manipulation of collaborators, assistants, and proteges. It's here that the high stakes of power, fame, and control collide in ways that are both shocking and revealing, setting the stage for the next chapter of controversy. Beyond the public controversies and shocking private behaviors, The Reckoning dives into an area that underscores Sean Diddy Combs' complex and often troubling relationship with the people around him. Alleged abuse and manipulation of collaborators and employees. One of the most compelling accounts comes from Rodney Lil Rod Jones, a rising hip-hop producer who worked closely with Diddy on the 2023 album The Love Album, Off the Grid. Hired under promises of creative freedom, ample recognition, and substantial payment, Jones found himself in a world that was the exact opposite. Over a grueling 13-month production process, he claims he was underpaid, only $29,000 for what was supposed to be a transformative career opportunity. Beyond financial exploitation, the doc reveals disturbing personal allegations. Jones recounts instances where Diddy allegedly engaged in sexual misconduct, including waking up next to him unexpectedly and showing him explicit material. These stories, shared alongside video and voicemail evidence, paint a picture of a professional relationship deeply entwined with power, manipulation, and intimidation. The documentary doesn't stop with Jones. Another key figure, Capricorn Clark, Diddy's longtime assistant, shares her harrowing experience of alleged abuse during her tenure. She recounts a situation in which Diddy allegedly kidnapped her at gunpoint in an attempt to confront Cassie, Ventura's new boyfriend, rapper Kid Cudi. The story is told with raw emotion, underscoring both fear and disbelief. Clark's testimony in the doc humanizes the collateral impact of Diddy's behavior. It's not just about scandal or legal trouble. Real people endured moments of terror and manipulation. Hearing her tell the story firsthand adds weight and immediacy that no court transcript or news headline could fully capture. By presenting these accounts in conjunction with archival footage and interviews, The Reckoning emphasizes the pattern rather than isolated incidents. The audience begins to see a recurring theme. Collaborators, assistants, and partners often face situations where loyalty, fear, and ambition collided. Diddy's charisma and reputation provided opportunities, but also created environments where boundaries were pushed, and abuse of power became normalized. For many, working with Diddy meant navigating a minefield of promises, obligations, and hidden expectations, and stepping out of line could carry severe personal and professional consequences. The doc also examines how these behaviors intersected with Diddy's public image. While he cultivated an aura of generosity, mentorship, and creative vision, these stories reveal the hidden, often dark cost of being in his orbit. It's a duality that fascinates and unsettles viewers. A man celebrated for his innovation and influence in music, simultaneously operating in ways that harmed those closest to him. him. The tension between public admiration and private misconduct is a key throughline of the series, showing that power, fame, and control are not without consequences. And just as the audience absorbs the magnitude of these allegations, the doc transitions seamlessly into another layer of scrutiny. Diddy's courtroom strategies, PR maneuvers, and interactions with media influencers. The pattern is clear. Every personal controversy, every allegation, feeds into a larger narrative about image, perception, and the high-stakes world he inhabits. The line between personal behavior and public consequence becomes impossible to ignore, setting the stage for the doc's final revelation. As the reckoning draws toward its conclusion, the documentary shifts focus from the shocking details of Sean Diddy Combs' private life to the public reactions, legal ramifications, and broader cultural context surrounding him. Viewers are offered a panoramic view of how the world responded, from collaborators and former employees to jurors and fans, highlighting the collision of celebrity, power, and accountability. The doc features interviews with jurors who issued Diddy's partial guilty verdict, former Danity Kane singer Aubrey O'Day, and other industry insiders, all of whom provide insight into the man behind the headlines. Each perspective adds nuance, forcing the audience to wrestle with the contradictions. A visionary entrepreneur, an aggressive mogul, a man surrounded by scandal, and someone with loyal fans who still celebrate his achievements. One of the most striking revelations is the scale and sophistication of Diddy's media and PR operations during his trial. The doc details how his team actively worked with new media reporters, bloggers, and social influencers, strategically guiding narratives and highlighting specific court transcripts. Blogger recounts how Diddy's team sent daily updates, pointing out moments they wanted amplified and ensuring favorable coverage. In the courtroom lunchroom, this strategic orchestration of media relations unfolded in plain sight, blurring the line between news reporting and influence. For viewers, this exposes not just the power of celebrity PR, but the way digital media can be harnessed to shape perception, even in high-profile legal cases. It's a reminder that in Diddy's world, narrative control is as critical as musical success. The documentary also explores the reactions of Diddy's former collaborators and employees. Stories like those of Rodney, Lil Rod, Jones, and Capricorn Clark resonate strongly, showing the human cost of fame and influence. These accounts, combined with the detailed depictions of sex scandals, violence, and personal excess, provide a sobering perspective on the price of proximity to power. While some viewers may be tempted to dismiss these narratives as sensationalized, the doc emphasizes that these are lived experiences, corroborated by multiple sources, and central to understanding the full picture of Diddy's empire. The reckoning doesn't shy away from the controversies surrounding its own production. With Curtis, 50 Cent Jackson serving as executive producer, the doc openly acknowledges the tension, framing the narrative as partially adversarial. Diddy's legal team responded to the doc with a statement noting that many stories feature personal grievances, financial motives, or credibility issues. This interplay between the documentary's claims, Diddy's public statements, and ongoing legal proceedings encourages viewers to question not only the man himself, but also how media narratives are constructed, contested, and consumed. Ultimately, this final section leaves the audience with a mixture of fascination, discomfort, and reflection. Diddy emerges as a complex figure, a trailblazing music mogul, a man whose ambition and charisma are undeniable, yet someone whose private behaviors, controversies, and alleged abuses cast long shadows over his achievements. The documentary forces viewers to grapple with these dualities, highlighting the complicated interplay between fame, power, and accountability in modern celebrity culture. And as the screen fades to black, the lingering question remains: how much of the legend we admire is real, and how much has been carefully curated, contested, or concealed? The reckoning leaves that answer up to us, but it ensures no viewer will forget the turbulence, ambition, and contradictions that define Sean Combs' extraordinary life.